Welcome to the news hour. Grain exports from Ukraine are expected to begin in the next 24 hours. 25 million tonnes are waiting in Ukrainian ports where they've been stuck since Russia invaded. And that's caused food shortages and price rises around the world. Let's get more on this from John Hendren, who's in the port city, in fact, of Odessa. So basically, John, if the grain does leave Ukraine, it's going to leave from really where you are.
Absolutely. This is one of three ports where those grain shipments will be leaving from, and they are where that grain is being stored right now. This is Odessa. The first shipments are expected to go from Chernomorsk, and then there would be shipments from Pivdeni as well. Now, there's been an inspection site where presumably the Russian officials who can control some of those areas will be inspecting those ships. But there's also been a corridor mapped out south down the coast on the Black Sea. That is theoretically a safe corridor. But we've seen the port of Odessa struck a couple of times. I shouldn't say the port. The region of Odessa has been struck a couple of times. And that leaves some of the farmers who are shipping this grain uncomfortable. We talked to one yesterday in northern Ukraine who said that they were going to store their grain on site in containers at their farm because they just don't feel it's safe yet. So those first shipments will really be a test as to whether other farmers are going to follow suit.
Let's say, John, you know, areas around Odessa have been targeted. It's made the international community and those involved in the shipping of grain very nervous. But again, there are other areas of Ukraine that have been under bombardment over the past 24 hours. So bring us up to speed on where we should be focused here.
That's right. And I should have mentioned that the 20 million tons of grain are now sitting at those three ports. But you're right. Today was a special day here in Ukraine because it was the first day Ukraine was going to celebrate Statehood Day. And probably as a link to that, 26 rockets were fired from Belarus territory. That is, of course, in coordination with Russia. That's a Russian attack, and it struck in northern Ukraine, in Chugayev, near Kyiv, and we have also learned that there was a power plant struck in Volhares, which is in the Donbass region. And then we have recently, just in the last couple of hours, learned a casualty count from yet another attack. This is one in central Ukraine, a rocket attack at Krepivnitsky. It's in central Ukraine, and we are told that 5 people were killed, 25 wounded. That's the only one of those rocket attacks in which we have a casualty count at this time.
John Hendren there for us in Odessa. Thanks very much for the update, John. We'll dip in with you through the day. Thank you. Now, a joint coordination centre to monitor grain exports from Ukraine opened in Istanbul on Wednesday. It's part of that deal where Kyiv and Moscow signed last week, which was brokered by Turkey and the UN. Now, Turkey's defence minister says it's an example of international cooperation needed to tackle global food shortages. Ibrahim Kalin is spokesman and special advisor to the Turkish president, and he joins me now from Istanbul. Mr. Kalin, good to have you with us on the programme, and thanks very much for your time. One gets the impression that the situation is still very delicate until those first ships leave Ukraine with the grain. How concerned is the Turkish president about the situation right now?
Of course, the situation remains fragile, critical on all sides. The war still is going on, but we've been able to broker this deal in the middle of this war. And we have concentrated our efforts, in fact, on some kind of a ceasefire agreement, prisoner exchange, and eventually a peace agreement, peace negotiation process. But it's too early for that, of course, to happen at this point. But at least we have this agreement whereby both the Ukrainian and Russian agricultural products, grain exports will be reaching international markets. The process has been rather difficult. It took us months of discreet negotiations from behind the scenes talks and meetings to reach this deal. And I think it will remain also rather critical sensitive as we go along with this process. But we have urged all sides, both sides, that is both the Russian and the Ukrainian sides, to stick to the main principles of the agreement that they signed last Friday here in Istanbul, in the presence of our president, President Erdogan, and the UN Secretary General. And with that unfortunate incident that happened the day after, on Saturday, we are hoping, in fact, we are reaching out also to both sides, that things will move on smoothly from this point onward, because it's really in the mutual interest of both countries to have this operation flowing.
And again, there was a great deal of concern that, as you say, less than 24 hours after that agreement was signed on Friday, we saw parts of Odessa, surrounding areas, targeted apparently by Russian forces. How much of the president, or how much does the president think that his own reputation is on the line? Because when you underwrite an international agreement, sitting alongside the UN Secretary General for something as delicate as this, you really have put your reputation in the spotlight, and you want both sides to understand that as well.
But President Erdogan used his own personal leadership diplomacy to make this deal happen. And as I said, it took months of negotiations from behind the scenes. And in fact, if you look at the process of what happened, of what unfolded over the last 5-6 months since this war started, this is actually the first major agreement that will deliver something on the ground, not only for Ukraine or Russia, but for the international community. So, I mean, in the middle of this war, it's not easy, to broker a deal like this. And it was really thanks to President Erdogan's personal leadership skills and diplomacy, and his ability to speak to both the Russian and the Ukrainian leadership, as well as to others, to make this happen. Of course, we are still very much concerned about the larger picture. That is the war that has been going on in Ukraine, and we do not condone this war. We do not believe that this is justified. Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty is critical, and we have to find a way to bring the parties to the negotiating table. And if you remember, in fact, the two major or main meetings that had the potential to lead to a peace agreement were also made possible here in Turkey. The first one was in Antalya. The second one was here on March 29th and in Istanbul, where the Russian and the Ukrainian negotiators came together. I don't want to sound too optimistic here, but in fact, this grain agreement may lay the foundations and it perhaps build enough trust for another round of talks that may lead to some kind of a ceasefire or peace talks. When you are in the middle of a war like this, it's not easy to have like a one overarching peace agreement where everything is under control.
No, it isn't, Mr. Kalin. If I can just get in there, though, but for all of that to happen, as you say, it's so delicate. You have to have these merchant ships with the grain on leaving to show that an agreement signed, I say, last Friday is successful. And if you agree on things, on small things, dare I say, grain shipments are a very large issue right now. But if you can agree on this sort of an issue, then they can lead to something else. But how soon do you think these shipments are going to move? It's being perhaps muted that within the next 24 hours might be a possibility. What can you tell us?
We are talking to the Ukrainian side. The Infrastructure Ministry of Ukraine, I'm sure Brako, in fact, was here on Friday also. They are actually preparing their ships. There are a number of ships loaded already. They are getting ready to sail. And of course, the Ukrainian side will provide safety and security and guidance for those ships in and around Odessa ports. And once they reach international waters, we will take over and we will monitor it from the Joint Cooperation Coordination Center here in Istanbul. So it's really up to both Ukraine and Russia to get their ships ready to sail. We are ready to receive them. There is no imminent danger of anything of the kind at this point. If they get ready, logistically speaking, everything can in fact start flowing in the coming days. By the way, this operation will bring not only Ukrainian grain, but also the Russian grain to the international markets. And altogether, when you put them together, you're talking about close to 50 million tons of agricultural products and fertilizers, which of course is very key for global food security. So that's why I said it's in the mutual interest of both countries and the international community. And I think everybody should support this agreement and address any issues that may arise there together.
Indeed. I mean, we know that both grain and fertilizer is not embargoed or sanctioned in any way, and this was confirmed by several ambassadors even last week, and we want to reaffirm that for viewers watching the programme. However, what hasn't been cleared up, and we've asked again and again several people, including the UN Secretary General, who I interviewed on Friday, was if there is an impasse on a merchant vessel, that either Ukraine or Russia does not agree with because of whatever reason. How does that impasse get resolved if they don't want that merchant ship to go any further? What happens?
Well, we will go step by step. The agreement that was signed last Friday here in Istanbul, in fact, lists a number of articles and actions. When we face a situation like this, we will, of course, implement, those conditions and the provisions require that both sides stick only to this agreement. Only agricultural products are carried. No other, like weapons of any kind, will be carried, and therefore there will be a mechanism to inspect them. So there will be an inspection team here. And that team will include representatives from Ukraine, Russia, UN, and Turkey. And therefore, we will have a mechanism here. The logistic side of it, in fact, will work as it worked before the war. How a ship leaves, say, Odessa port or another port from Russia and reaches international waters in the Black Sea, reaches the Bosphorus, and then from here goes to its final destination. If there is an issue, there are a number of provisions. Immediately, this joint coordination center and representatives there, will have their consultations there. And of course, we want to make sure that everything, goes smoothly. But if there are issues, there are mechanisms in place that will address those issues.
We shall see what happens in the coming hours. For the moment, Ibrahim Kalin